painted for justice, hoping to see justice before it all fades to black. Yes, his shit, girl Cadillac. I know this is not gonna keep on. Let me do this real quick because I don't want those vibrations through my whole video. Okay, so I got the do not disturb. I forgot to even put that because I hate that. Even though I don't have it on, it still vibrates and it messes up the quality of the video. But anyways, guys, today is February 9th, 2024. Yes. About to head into work, so I am in a little parking lot. So I don't know if it's a little noisy. And I may not get to finish my whole video. I was gonna do it after I got off of work, but I was like, you know what, I ain't put out a video in a minute, and my little channel is like, it's going to bed, girl. So I gotta start getting my videos back out. um I don't know, it's just so hard, but y'all already know, trying to do so many different things, it is so hard to keep up with everything. All right, so I have some notes. I'll do as much as I can. Right now, I got about a good 20 minutes, so I'll do as much as I can. Read it as clearly as I can, and then if there's anything left, I will do a video when I get off of work. But this topic is actually really good, so I can make several videos out of it. Okay, so it is what happens when we don't acknowledge our privileges. It is my belief that when we don't acknowledge our privileges, we tend to show up in the world as a holier than thou type person. And we tend to measure everyone else up to our level. Going on, then surely you can too. And we think that way without even knowing the other person's XYZ. What if their X, Y, and Z was more severe than your X, Y, and Z? So without knowing all the variables in the equation, how can we say that your life problems were greater or equal to that of the others? And if you made it, surely the other person can. And if they don't, it's because they just aren't trying hard enough. Knowing, I, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I messed up right there. Knowing we all don't start off at the same level in life. Some start with a head start. Some start with a greater head start, like those that grew up with a silver spoon in their mouth. Some start at ground level. Some start below ground level, such as those that live below the poverty level. It's really hard to dig yourself out the hole and then once above ground continue to grow than one whose X, Y, and Z consisted of starting with the head start. And I have in quotes, a privilege. That is a privilege to start above poverty. And then telling one that started below ground level that they made it out such and such, and if they didn't, without any hearing of anything about their X, Y, and Z, I got that in quotes. If they made it, it's kind of their own fault, and they should. I'm sorry, if they didn't make it, it's kind of their own fault, and they should have just worked harder. Okay, let me go to the next page of notes. Girl, I got it in on Monday. I was writing because this was a really good topic. Okay, so they should have just worked harder. Another phrase, I'm realizing this topic is like striking, well, one of the biggest bitter roots that run the deepest bitter root that we need to start to uproot to begin to make the necessary progress forward in this world that we share together. The current way we live in live. It's kind of like on those old sitcoms when two people that live together occupy a space together get mad and they divide the room, or they draw a line in the sand and everything on one person's side of the space is off limits to the other person that is occupying the other side of the space, and vice versa. What if the two compromised and came together? What if instead of gaslighting others to feel like their problems of X, Y, and Z are no justification as to why they didn't arise to the same level? I would give it an example. You know how when I talk about my husband saying he's wrongfully convicted, and I talk about prison reform, and they say, well, they should not did what they did. Like, do you know the X, Y, and Z of how they ended up in prison? You don't. And if you had the same X, Y, and Z, are you sure you wouldn't be sitting in that prison bed right next to them? That's what I'm meaning. Okay, so as to why they didn't arise to the same level, we actually listen to others' backstory. What if we actually listen to others' backstory? Real life scenario example. When Black Panther came out, and I absolutely fell in love with Michael B. Jordan. So when Creed 2 came out, I just had to go see it. Now, mind you, at the time, I hadn't seen the Rocky series or even Creed, for that matter. Therefore, I was missing pieces of the storyline, the backstory. No joke. Now, I wrote this as I was writing this at work board. No joke, as I'm writing this, I was pacing back and forth and stopped and went outside, and they were playing the Rocky song. So as I was giving that analogy, they were actually, I went outside and heard dun 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 dun. Now that song to me meant Chief from martial arts. We was about to pass away, girl, with all that stuff he was finna have us do. Girl, no fear, no fear. Like, girl, he would have us doing some everything. But really, low key, that's what that song makes me think of. But as I was making that analogy, I walked outside and heard that dun dun, and I just took that as a sign for God, from God, that yes, this is a good topic. And he was downloading it. It wasn't even me because it was flowing so good. Okay, I went to look at the time and it said it was 4:44 p.m. Anyways, I thought the movie was okay, but to someone who's seen the entire series, like I have now, to escalate it, what if they seen the entire series and was around in the 70s and the 80s when the movie series was in its heyday? That person could have a different opinion of how good the movie was. Maybe they could think that was one of the best movies ever. Do I have the right to downplay the other person's observation of the movie? The exact same movie. So the exact same life. We got the exact same 24 hours. But do we know the backstory? All right. So that's why we don't need to compare with each other. How would a boxer view the movie as opposed to how would a wrestler feel about the movie? So bottom line is, we all have different vantage points than others. So who are we to dismiss others' observations from their vantage point? Maybe they have a clearer view of the same object, like the justice system. Maybe us that have been affected by it have a clearer view of the justice system than those that just know it from just hearing about it, seeing it in movies, thinking you know your rights and don't really know what the heck goes on. What about those? Like, we are closer in view to the justice system. That's how we know what's happening. You know what I'm saying? It's with the system. Therefore, we should learn to listen to others and truly hear and analyze what they are saying and take into account where the person is coming from. I have another example. When I was working at the super center in the shoe department, one day there was this one girl that was in a lower level management position. She pulled me to the side and was basically giving me a verbal warning about my productivity. She was like, it's such and such time, and the pallet of shoes are not done yet. I tried to inform her about my disabilities, specifically carpal tunnel. That makes it harder to put the shoes on and pull the shoes off the shelf because of the way you would have to handle the shoebox. After handling a few boxes, my hands would cramp up and go numb. I would have to stop, shake out my hands. I also stretch my hands, and then I would continue working the pallet. Therefore, my disability, it would take me longer to work the pallet than it would someone that didn't have a disability. So that's also a privilege, you know, that didn't have disabilities holding them back. To be able to work without disabilities is a lot more of a privilege than working with disabilities. And then being a disabled worker is a lot more privilege, and I get into that later, than a person that's disabled that can't work. So I too have to recognize my privilege. And that's what I'm saying. We all should recognize our privileges. Okay, anyways, she says she should be done. I'm sorry, that didn't have disabilities holding them back. Anyway, she says you should be done by now, and there's no excuse. Then she goes on to compare. She says, I have seen many clear the same type of pallet faster than I was. And then I asked her if any of those people she was comparing me to, where did I leave off? Okay, those people she was comparing me to also had carpal tunnel. I didn't go that far, but you also have to consider the severity of the carpal tunnel as well. There's mild, mild, moderate, and severe carpal tunnel. I have severe carpal tunnel and nerve damage. So unless the other person had the same level of disability, it would not be wise to actually form a discriminating, and actually discriminating what she was doing. So you see how not applying each person's specific variables to the equation, and how the same people can do the same things easier. So when you apply those privileges, you can see how, oh, I can understand how you can do that, and then give grace to the other person. They didn't have that privilege. Okay, some others, because no one has the same setup. Okay, and I'm on my third. No, I might get done before I gotta run. No, I only got 4 more minutes. Okay, to go back to the point about there being levels to privilege, the person with the fully functioning body has the privilege of better physical health, or privilege or blessing of better physical health than I. But I still have to recognize that I still have a level of physical health privilege or blessing that some others, example, my older sister, Kashara, battled MS for half of her life. And over time, she progressively lost the mobility of her hands and the rest of her body. So even with my disability in play in my life, I still have to recognize my privilege in life. Again, to not recognize it tends to make one show up in the world as holier than thou. So let's say I was going back trying to compare myself to my sister and saying, hey, I have problems with my hands and I got up and did this. It looks really silly for me to be saying that to her when she had a more heavier burden, which meant because her burden was heavier, I had privilege in the fact that I could do some things that she couldn't do. So I have to recognize that. To not recognize it makes me seem like one of those holier than thous. And if you apply that same example to many situations, mostly for me, the justice situation is what I'm applying it to. Okay, so I still have to recognize my privilege. We tend to think of privilege. Now, this is what messes people up, is because we tend to think of privilege as grandiose things. Sometimes privilege is just having our basic needs met. It could be basic and it could still be a privilege because one has it and one doesn't. I love to talk about justice. When it comes to justice, privilege can be having your basic rights, constitutional rights, and civil rights, and not being stripped of them. That's privilege. So the person being stripped of their rights would not see it as a they would see it as a I'm sorry, the person not being stripped of their rights may not view that as a privilege because they think everybody's supposed to have this. How could it be a privilege? But the person being stripped of their rights is going to see you that have their rights intact and not violated as a privilege. I get to that later. Before I jump on the boat of justice, let me speak about another privilege that I have and I didn't recognize as a privilege until I got older and wiser. Growing up being raised by both of my biological parents in the same household, as we witnessed the disintegration of the family, I have to recognize that privilege. I grew up in a house with a backyard, family, multiple vehicles. I can't remember one time going without eating, our lights off, or our water being cut off. Now, the family dynamic wasn't perfect, so we did have problems, right? But I still recognize my privilege. Now, it would be a bad thing for me to judge those that may not have been able to arise to the same level as me, that may not have had the same privileges of growing up, in a total family. I mean, well, families are so different now, but you know the point I'm trying to drive. Okay. Okay. To arise to the same level as me that may not have had the same privileges would not be right at all. Just like some that have the privilege to go to school, some that don't have the privilege to go to school, and one outcome becomes better than the other. You don't have the right to say, hey, if I did it, you could have done it too. You don't know. Recognize that you were privileged to go to school, and because of it, you may have more. Just recognize your privileges. Okay, I hope this is making it more clear how we need to recognize and not deny that we have certain privileges. Sometimes many times, money creates more privilege in a situation. Most times, the amount of money one has determines whether certain doors would be open or closed to certain individuals. Amount of money one has when it comes to the justice system. It's privilege, yes. Which money refers to as, I'm sorry, which many refers to as the injustice system, because we're on two different vantage points, right? And I agree with the injustice system. I agree with calling it that. Being the injustice system because it is supposed to be a completely level playing field. Though it may appear to be, it is not. It's actually an entanglement of privilege. And I got one little last part before I be late. Of many misconceptions of the justice slash injustice system is the right to a fair trial before a jury of your peers. Well, jury trial is supposed to be completely level and fair. But one of the things that tilt the scales of the justice is money, privilege. Privilege of having money and finances tilts the scales of justice. And yes, one's net worth can determine one's outcome in a jury trial. They mostly target the poor. Okay, because they know the poor don't have the resources to get out of it. Why target the rich if the rich have the resources to get out of your trap? There's no point to entrap them, right? While we are on the topic of privilege when it comes to justice, I want to speak on a moment for just a second, and it stops there. I was going to get into the topic of white privilege. Now, when it comes to justice, that is considered in a lot of our society because our society was built on certain issues and privileges. That was the whole basis of it, to have one below set below so that one could be set above. If you have everyone level, nobody's above, nobody's below. But I didn't write no more notes, so I really finished right in time. Yes, but I wanted to write something on white privilege because it really irritated me, because I was talking about my husband's case and how race did have a factor to play in it. And I was saying how when we try to be, they love to say, oh, y'all just need to work and y'all just do this. They group us all together and judge us together, right? So whether I'm good, bad, or the other, I am judged with everyone that's doing bad. And I hate that. And all our black men are being judged with those that are doing bad when there are some good black men out there. And that's what I cannot stand that. I hate that group judgment. And because I was saying that, someone just immediately started attacking me saying that, oh, well, I don't have no white privilege. I didn't even bring anything up about white privilege. He brought it up. And he was like, I grew up like this and I grew up like that. And I don't see my privilege. But remember what I said. Go back to, sometimes privilege is just basic. I have the privilege to, like, I don't like my job like that. I want to be an entrepreneur. There's somebody somewhere that wants a job and can't get a job. Maybe they have the felony background and they can't get a job. So I have the privilege of having a clear background. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying I don't have the privilege of this and this and that. I'm recognizing I do have that privilege. Yes, it could have been me with that record. You know what I'm saying? So rather than say, anyways, I got to go to work. I'm about to be late, y'all. I'm sorry. But yeah, that's what I was just saying. There are some privileges that come when you go to court with a certain skin tone than others. There are some privileges that come when you go to court with deeper pockets than others. There are certain privileges that come when you go to court and you have different connections than others. It's just how it is. We all have different levels of privilege, and we have to acknowledge them. All right, I'm about to be late. It's your girl, Thank you. And I'm going to try to come back more than I've been. I've just been really busy.